over the last 40 years, what evangelical Christians have done in the classical Christian education movement, this is the single biggest cultural win that the church has in America over the last 40 years, by a long shot. In every other area, we've been getting destroyed, but the starting of classical schools, that has been the one thing where we have taken so much ground, and I think we just need to lean into that more and more.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today I'm very honored to be joined by Dr. Ben Merkle. Dr. Merkle, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Quick introduction on you. You've got a long list of accolades. You have a DPhil in Oriental Studies and MST in Jewish Studies, both from Oxford in Cambridge.
In Oxford.
In Oxford.
Cambridge is the other place.
Yes, that you don't speak of.
Yes.
You've got an MA in English Literature, a BS in Education, and both of those are from the University of Idaho, correct?
I do.
And then you have a Greyfriars Letter. You are currently the president of NSA and a senior fellow of theology, also at NSA. And you are an elder at the Christ Church that we have been hearing so much about in the news. You are author of multiple books, including The White Horse King. And on top of all of that, husband and a father.
I am, yes.
There we go. So I guess the first question is, why all those degrees? Why did you decide to go to college for so long?
It's a sick little addiction that I have. I can't help it. I keep doing it. I think different people react to education, formal education degrees in different ways. I tend to thrive there, and so it's useful to me. The undergrad at U of I, that was just started when I was I had no clue what I was doing, so I signed up for college. But then slowly, as I started to kind of dial in more and more where I wanted to work, the MA in English Lit was kind of more a hobby. The Greyfriar Letter was as I was starting to really see ministry as what I wanted to do, and then as I got pulled into NSA, and I bounced back and forth between I preach at our downtown service, so I'm part pastor, and then I am the president here. And as I got pulled more into NSA, I really felt like I needed the appropriate credentials for the position that I had, and that's when I moved to England, did the master's and the doctorate at Oxford, and then came back with those because those really kind of equipped me. I felt more and more that I was going to spend a life in higher ed, and those were important for locking me into that world.
Do you think that getting all those degrees would have been helpful if you weren't in higher ed, or was that specifically because that was the field you were pursuing?
Yeah. So first of all, I would probably I would want to make the distinction between the actual education and then the piece of paper, because it is important. I think more and more people are thinking of education simply as the piece of paper, that certificate that you need to get into certain things, which is, if that's all you're getting, then that's just sad. You should not, don't bother with something if it's simply a credential to get you through a door. And I think that's the way the higher ed world has really moved. So that's the way most people think of the college diploma. So it's not so much the degrees, it's the education that I found really necessary for those positions. For ministry, my theological study was important. For work in the college classroom, my work at Oxford was really important. Had I gone a different route, I would probably pick a different set of educational choices. But those worked with really who God made me to be and the battle He gave me to fight. So
you started at the U of I and then made a somewhat drastic shift to Oxford in England. Why'd you choose Oxford, and how was the experience different from the U of I?
Yeah, Oxford was nuts because U of I, it's North Idaho. It was pretty casual, pretty easy. I show up at Oxford and it is a different stinking world. It really is. First, just America to England. University of Idaho to Oxford, there was so much to catch up on. I think the thing that was interesting about Oxford is you get a few places like this in the world. There are certain locations where kind of everything comes together. I just spent the last week in D.C., and it's one of those places where you're in the room with 9 senators, and this guy's running for vice president, and it's like you come into certain places where everything comes together and things are really happening. Oxford is like that. Weirdly, I think Moscow is increasingly like that. It's just weird walking down the street in Moscow and saying noticing the different people that are here and the things that are going on. It's really strange. I think Moscow is like what Oxford would have been like in the very early years. But Oxford now, it's crazy how at any given moment, I rode my bike over once to Richard Dawkins' house to watch Collision at his house with him. Like those kinds of things happen when you're in Oxford. The kind of people you meet with, it's an exciting place, and it does mean when you come to class, the people that you're working with. When I was at U of I never had to try that hard. I had a natural academic giftedness that like I could be pretty lazy and still do just fine. I showed up at Oxford, and boy, that was not the case. I remember sitting in a class where, I'm in this in a class. There's 3 or 4 people at the very most, so there's no hiding. You don't like pretend, that you're not there. You're on at all times. And in this class of 3 to 4 people, there are people who, he taught himself Arabic in a year. These are people who their ability to read, to study, to learn is shocking and a bit terrifying. It's a lot of people who have freakish brains. And so the level that you have to come prepared to be able to hang is quite high, and it's invigorating, it's terrifying, but it's really good for you.
Yeah. What was the experience like? Obviously, Oxford used to be Christian, correct? Mm-hmm. In the kind of collapse of the Christianity of Oxford, right. Did you still see those kind of remains there?
Oh yeah, I mean, you see those remains there more than almost anywhere else because it literally is remains. Like architecturally, it's built into the whole everything. My college was Christ Church College, where John Owen was once dean. Mortification of Sin. Those texts are his. The Wesleys all went there. You look down the street. There's Wesley's church. All of that happened here. Also, all of the Reformation martyrs, Oxford, the joke is Cambridge grew them, Oxford slew them. You could see where everybody was burned at the stake. The story of the Christian faith is in the walls and in the ground all around you there, but it's remains. It's completely gone. I found, this is slightly different, but the first year I was there, I did a master's in Jewish studies, so I'm in the Jewish studies department. I had frequently had professors who were fully observant Jews, wearing the yarmulke, eating kosher, keeping Sabbath. Well, they didn't believe in God. They didn't believe that God existed, and it was this strange. It's this cultural thing, but no actual faith or belief, and that's there in a lot of the Christianity that's like that. It makes it very strange, and also when you're doing like a theologically oriented degree, it's bizarre.
Yeah. And obviously now you're the president of NSA. How is NSA different from the U of I? And how is it different from Oxford while at the same time still trying to be somewhat like both of those?
Yeah, so different from U of I in that, U of I is trying to be this large state university, so obviously secular. There are multiple degrees, all going different directions. They're just generally trying to create people for the workforce. New St. Andrews is very small, and really focused towards this one end of graduating leaders who shape culture and the lordship of Jesus Christ. So this biblical worldview is going to pervade everything, and there's really this kind of like-mindedness of vision and this idea that we want to shape a culture that loves Jesus and that where you can tell. So it's very different. I think another distinction, and this would go back to something earlier I said, is because we tend to think of the college degree as about vocational certification. And I think that would be very dominant at pretty much every state university. You go up to any student and say, why are you doing this? What are you getting this degree for? And they're going to say, so I can get a good job. I think I need this education in order to get that job. I would say the NSA degree, we would hope that it does add significantly to your professional opportunities and prepares you for that world in any number of different directions. But it's more than just that. We track the with our alumni, we track the divorce rate for alumni. I hope that 4 years at NSA means you're far more likely to have a faithful marriage. Right now, it's definitely our statistics is right around 2% or so of our alums that are divorced. We track things like what percentage of our male graduates are church officers after 10 years after graduation. We see a kind of surprisingly high percentage of, these are people who are being brought into church leadership, who are establishing faithful families, who are starting businesses. It's more than just you've got a job. It's you are a certain kind of person and you started changing culture around you because of it. So that would be another distinction with U of I. The other contrast was with Oxford. Oxford is... there's a lot of ways we'd be different. We don't have nearly the level of nice architecture. My college, my dining hall was the hall where the Harry Potter, it's the Harry Potter dining hall where that was filmed. And everywhere you walk is someplace that you recognize from a film or something like that. But I think that one of the things I noticed, I spent a lot of time when we were in England visiting historical sites and things. And one of the things that I noticed was you would go to somewhere like Lindisfarne. You go to Lindisfarne and it's these stunning ruins. I mean, just beautiful, and it's this place that you can just feel the profundity of the history and the impact of everything, and you're standing in these ruins and you're thinking about Lindisfarne, the monastery that was here, and the Vikings sacking it, and the monks that were faithful here, and the Lindisfarne Gospels, and you're standing in these rocks, it's like it all happened here. And then what you realize is none of these buildings are from that time period. These buildings were the ruins for something that was built hundreds of years later. And you would notice this again and again. My study, I spent a lot of time working on Alfred the Great. Where's the building from Alfred the Great? There's lots of buildings in Winchester where he was, but you don't see the buildings from his time. And one of the things I started to realize is that the people that make history, the architecture tends to follow. It's 100, 200 years later, you start to get those glorious buildings, but the people that are actually doing something profound to shape the world, they tend to do it in a world of, trailer courts and, split level rancher houses. They do it in the middle of the boring and the monotonous because they're building something. And then 100 years later, the spires, the steeples, all those things go up. So I don't think that. So Oxford is stunning like that, but and we're not like that at all. But I think that's because we're where it's actually starting to happen now. Oxford, you're kind of standing in the ruins.
How are you practically differing in your education from the U of I so that you're creating the kinds of people that have that 2% divorce rate?
Yeah. So there's a number of things that we do different. I mean, obviously having the faculty we have, the statement of faith that we have, where we're faith is being put in what we're teaching. It permeates the courses and whatnot. The degree is set up to kind of aim in one direction. But there are a few other things about NSA. One of the things that we do is we say no dorms. And the reason is because I think this is a concession, but it's not really a concession because it's really a design feature. The thing that is most effective about NSA is not NSA. It's this community. It's living in this community. And if we put the students in dorms, it would remove them from that community. So we don't do dorms because we want our students involved in this local church community, being discipled and mentored inside of this community. I think that's another really important part of what we're doing at NSA.
Yeah. The public school system education has kind of seen a somewhat drastic and very fun to watch decline. What happened? Where did we go wrong with the public school education? Were we ever on the right course, or was it kind of doomed from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's something fundamentally wrong with the government education to begin with. I really think education is the business of the family. I think that the building of schools and employing a school to send your kids there is a faithful way of handling that responsibility. But I think the responsibility is ultimately on parents, and I think the government has made this claim that it's the government's job to educate your children. And what you start to see is this slow, I think you see this in a lot of ways where there starts to be this assumption that the government actually is responsible for your kids, and that like you are a parent to them at the government's permission. Like they'll allow you to serve as parents, but they're really the government's children. I think that that's just fundamentally wrong. So I think there's something wrong at the very beginning. That said, I'm sure it was very, very well-meaning people throughout. I think there are a couple of other places that you see it going in the wrong direction. I'll go back to the whole vocational element. The notion that education is primarily about preparing you for the workforce has really changed all education, and it's changed. And as the education is handed off to the government tends to think of the economy as something that it's responsible for. Listening to Biden just the other night, he's talking about, I made 200,000 jobs. I made all of these jobs. And it's like the notion that it's the government's responsibility to make jobs is, I think, just sick and terrible. If it's the government's job to do that, we are slaves and servants to the government. We make jobs. We ought to be the entrepreneurial man who goes out, sees a need, starts it, launches it. That's what makes jobs. It's not the government's role to make jobs. And I think that as that notion that the government is sort of supposed to be responsible for the economy, and then combined with, it's the government's job to educate these children, and that education is about equipping them with certain vocational skills so they can go into the economy. It turns us into little cogs in a machine that the government is running. And that is a really perverted way of thinking about the world. It's not true. So I think that that's one of the most fundamental problems. And then the next step was basically the godlessness of the public schools. They initially started with Christianity throughout the curriculum, and now that's gone. And I think the removal of faith from education really just completely destroys what an education is supposed to be.
Yeah. How much of that current reliance on government, but also just the problems we see throughout culture, can be traced back to the school system? Is it their fault, or does the problem go deeper than that?
Well, boy, that's a big question. I'll go as far as to say the takeover of the public school system and the weaponization, the way the progressive left has taken over education. You look at K-12 schools and college campuses and all of your professors there, and check what is the political affiliation, what is the ideological loyalty of all of these faculty, and it's a vast majority, a scary, terrifying majority, hardcore progressive left. They have taken over that whole system, and I think it's why America has been able to turn on a dime so quickly. On a dime, I mean, it's been 40 years, 50 years of this really progressive takeover and turn, but in the history of a nation, that's just a blink. That's a moment. And I think it's because they've stepped in and they've taken over the nurture of the next generation and the discipleship of the next generation. I think that we had a job to raise our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and we abdicated by handing it off to people who were intent to break that bond, of handing off of the faith from the fathers to the next generation. You go to the University of Idaho, you go to any state university. It's funny how many faculty members really see it, and they see this as a noble calling. To these kids were raised in these closed-minded, backwards families, and my job is to help them, kind of birth them out of that, to teach them to question it and get them free from that. I mean, I think they earnestly believe they're doing this wonderful good, but that is their goal, is to take these kids away from that tradition.
Yeah. Why did we hand over the education of our children to the government?
Well, it's easy. It's free. It's easy, financially easy. It's just easy in terms of just the workload. And it's just one of those decisions that happens so subtly, I think the other thing is like, nobody likes being the weird one. Like nobody likes being there always, when a group gathers, there's the in crowd, there's the normal people, and then there's the weird guy over there. And to say, no, I will not give my kids to you, requires that you say, you know what? I guess I'm going to be the weird guy. And that's something that a lot of people just don't have the courage or the fortitude to make that kind of decision. It's hard.
Yeah. What should the response of parents be, though, at this point? Do you try and reform the public school system, or is it time to just abandon it and leave both Christian and non-Christian parents alike?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm all for, I really think that Christians have abandoned too many institutions. I think that we don't have, we are quitters when it comes to taking an institution and running it. That's one of the things that I've, stepping into this position at NSA, realizing what it takes to actually hold an institution together and keep it on a certain path, and then looking around and saying, okay, where are the people that can teach me how to do this? And seeing very few Christians who have taken an institution and held on to it. So I don't say this lightly, but I do think the public school system is largely gone. And I think that it's time to start and build private schools. Probably one of the reasons why I think it's gone is because I just don't think it was right to start with. I don't think it was right from the beginning. I think we ought to be building our own educational institutions. And I would say over the last 40 years, what Christians, evangelical Christians, have done in the classical Christian education movement, this is the single biggest cultural win that the church has in America over the last 40 years, by a long shot. In every other area, we've been getting destroyed, but the starting of classical schools, that has been the one thing where we have taken so much ground, and I think we just need to lean into that more and more.
Yeah. The response of many parents, though, has been to homeschool. What are your kind of thoughts of private school versus homeschool? What are the dangers in both?
Yeah, I'd be I'm a little bit agnostic on that. When we lived in England, we homeschooled, so we're homeschoolers. I think that I dislike when people give one size fits all advice. When they say this is this is God's way over here. If I can't see it clearly in the text, I think you're selling me something. So I would not want to make the argument that you must homeschool. You must have a traditional school or something like that. I think both have their gifts. When we were in Oxford, we were moving fast. We were by ourselves. We needed to homeschool. That's just the way it was. There wasn't a school around that we could use. We couldn't have afforded it if we wanted. We were only there for a few years. And so for us, those 3 years were so fun. It was so fun as a family in a little farmhouse out in the fields outside of Oxford with my 5 kids there homeschooling, and we just had an utter blast. So that was great. When I'm here, though, our kids went to Logos, and I found this is where I think the building of institutions has greater cultural. There's something powerful when you have not just a family off by themselves, but when you have 50 families, 100 families who have come together and they're working together, and they're all plowing the same direction. It changes towns. There's one thing I'll say. There's something funny going on in Moscow right now, as far as just like there's a lot that's going on. And one of the things I've pointed out is Doug Wilson, pastor of Christ Church, my father-in-law, and founder of New St. Andrews. When I'm around, traveling, when I'm in DC, it's funny to me how much Doug's name is synonymous with a town. And there are other big name ministers, and they might be known for a ministry, they might be known for a church, or something like that. But Doug is the only one I know of where you say Doug Wilson, you say Moscow, Idaho. Those two are synonymous. And I think that there's something really interesting about that. And I think that goes back to Doug's impulse to start schools. Because when he started Logos School, the New St. Andrews, he made something in this town that's bigger than just his pulpit. And it became not just a church that's going in a certain direction, it became a town that's going in a certain direction. I think there's something really profound about that. So I'll reaffirm what I said at the beginning. I don't think there's a God's choice between homeschooling and private schools, but I do think that the banding together, forming institutions, moving in the same direction has a disproportionate impact on taking towns, on taking ground, and I think that that's the need of the hour.
Yeah, one of the things people say when they move here is often they moved here for Logos.
Yep.
And then they find, and then Christ Church, and then all of the other things that come with that. But they came here for the kids' education first.
And then the other half came here just for NSA and had planned on leaving, and then they got married, they started having kids, and then their grandparents wanted to be around the grandchildren, and they moved to town. And it's the educational institutions have formed an anchor here unlike anywhere else.
Yeah. The other response of people to the government taking over not only the private public education system, but also some other areas, has been kind of the guns, guts, beers, America. Yeah. Hoorah.
Right.
What are the dangers? There are good things about that, but there are also some dangers in that.
Yeah. There's a lot of good to that. That is, I said at the beginning that who's ready to be the weird guy. Lately, to be masculine has been labeled the weird guy, and there's been a crowd who said, I don't care, I will be that. And so to the extent that we've had this sort of bold recovery of a number of things that were starting to become taboo but should be totally normal, I think that it's a fantastic thing. I think the other thing that it's done is added not just the sort of masculine spirit, but a spirit of courage, of optimism, of
let's get this done.
What's that?
Let's get this done.
Let's get this done.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there's a certain kind of defiance that's really important. And there's been a crowd that's been not scared to defy on certain things. I think COVID was such a good moment for us all. That whole stupid time of everybody being snippy about whether you're wearing a mask or not, it was so good for a whole generation of young people to grow up learning how to say, I'm just going to go to the grocery store and I don't care. And if you yell at me, you can throw me out. That's fine. Learning that kind of courage it was a small thing. It's good to have that in our DNA. So that crowd, I think that there's a lot of things about that are good. I think that the dangerous parts of it, or not dangerous, but parts of it that I think that I would want to push back against. Frequently, there can be an anti-intellectualism there, and I think that they are right to be dismissive about a whole world of things, but I think that they might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So for instance, I think in that crowd, the notion that I don't need your stinking degree. I just need. I'm just going to go do this. I think they're right. You don't need that stupid piece of paper. You don't. But there is an education that we've spent, 1,000 years of developing. And if we toss out that education that has been formative for the building of the Western culture and particularly the Christian church, I don't think we realize how much we're losing with that. So I think that there's that anti-intellectualism. I think that there is an individualism there frequently that pushes against this institution building that I'm saying. I think we need to be working together to take over institutions, to build them. If you come in with that spirit of individualism, you'll always sabotage it. You'll never build anything bigger than yourself. And that's short-sighted.
Yeah. Where does that spirit of masculine defiance come from?
Well, frequently, I think from the Holy Spirit.
But some of these people are not Christians.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I think probably a lot of it is just the frustration of living in this world where God wrote his law on our heart. He natural revelation is written on our heart, and we know things. You can find them in the Bible, but some of it you should be able to find just by opening your eyes and using your brain to know that a boy is not a girl and a girl is not a boy. Boys don't get pregnant. There's certain things like that are just obvious. And then we've got this regime that's trying to press down on us total lies. And I think when you live inside of that for long enough, pretty soon something breaks and you go, you know what? I'm not gonna play your tune anymore, and I'm just gonna defy it. So I think a lot of it's just this frustration that has built up with being told again and again that the world is a way that it actually isn't. And I can look with my own eyes and see it's not really like that.
Yeah. How do you keep that spirit while at the same time adding in the intellectualism and the...
Yeah. In Calvin's Institutes, he's talking about the difference between natural revelation and special revelation. That common sense that we all have that allows us to talk to a non-Christian and we can make total sense with them because the law of God's written in their heart. That's natural revelation. But he says that we all have natural revelation, but because of sin, it's clouded, and it's as if our eyesight is, we can see, but we see with bad eyesight. I can make it across the road without getting hit, but I can't read the road signs. Your sight is blurry. And he says Scripture is like a set of spectacles that you put on, and suddenly it all comes into focus. And so I think what we need to do is we need to address the world around us now with a clear teaching of Scripture and the gospel. And I think it's such a good moment, because there's a lot of people who are going, this doesn't make sense. I know you're all wrong. And then suddenly when a really strong biblical teacher can step in and say, right, and here's the correct answer, it's really satisfying to suddenly see, oh, you get it, and start pointing them to the fact that, right, yes, you weren't weird for thinking this is all a mess, but it all resolves in the gospel, and we have to get you there if you want to make real sense of the world.
Yeah. How do you keep that? And where do we lose that originally, and how do we not do that again? Lose not only the hoorah,
right,
but also the hoorah plus intelligence.
Yeah, I do think that honestly, a lot of it was handing away our children and not having the not understanding the biblical duty of raising our kids. I think that fathers in particular, there was an abdication a long time back where fathers had just become absent, and that meant that young men grew up without a model of masculinity in their lives. And then when you don't have a model of masculinity in your life, either you don't develop masculinity yourself, or you develop a perverted form of it. You end up in biker gangs, or like something like that. I think the engagement of fathers is a really, really key part of what we're missing.
Yeah. As there's kind of a general distrust of government that's increasing, and especially with the Biden debates and all of those things, as he says that he obeys his commander in chief, and everyone starts to wonder who is your commander in chief. Where is, in a perfect world, what role does the government play, and how much do we trust them?
Yeah. Well, so I think the perfect world is a resurrection. So we're headed in that direction.
In a more perfect world.
Yes. When we're all doing what we should ish. I do think that there is I think is what a lot of these things I'll just be quoting Doug Wilson isms because I think he gets us all really well. I mean, one of the things he would say would be, we need to understand politics is not our savior. Politics will be saved, but it's not our savior. I think people, because they don't have God in their life, that little vacuum gets filled in by the state, and the state takes this authority and this role that it has no right to take. It becomes God. And I think that the answer is to have God in our lives and have godly people in the government. One of the things that I notice is the almost complete lack of Christians engaged in local politics. We watch national politics, we watch Biden blathering, and we get angry at that, but we don't do anything locally. So we have opinions and whatnot, and we vote in the presidential election, but we don't have any idea or engagement on the local stuff. You show up at the local, committee meetings, and it's these, 60-year-old ladies with 12 cats and nothing in their life but this committee. Like they don't have God, they don't have family, they don't have a life, and they give their lives to these little local government appointments. Those are the people that are running our local governments. I would say Christians, it's hard because you do have a life. Christians, you got a family, you got a job, you got a church, you want to go hunting, you want to go play basketball, and the idea of being engaged in local politics is kind of hard to fit in there.
Especially when you kind of don't understand, and there's all this gibberish and
it is, but I think that we need to take the time to roll up our sleeves and do the work to actually be engaged, so that we are the ones that are governing at this level, and to restore it to its proper place. Because I do think that politics is this, it's taken this idol status because it's replaced where God is supposed to be. I don't think it'll be put back to where it should be without Christians being engaged.
Yeah. one of the responses to kind of this distrust of government is, I'm going to grow my own vegetables. Everything's going to be homegrown, home sourced. Should the response be more of, I'm going to build in the same way that the educational response should be, I'm going to try and build schools? Should it generally be, I'm going to try and build, a less reliant on government food structure?
Yeah, there has been this whole movement. A lot of it has been kind of linked together with this foodie sort of movement, which I think is all fun. I mean, we have a garden. I love a garden. It's fantastic. The notion that I'm somehow becoming self-reliant on this garden is a complete crock. I mean, now, I'm not going to live off my land. I'm not. I think that there is a helpfulness in developing increasingly localized economies and networks. I think that that's healthy and good, but it's an economy and a network. We are not made to be solitary beings. The church is a body, and the church is a body with each of us as different body parts, and we function best when we're together, working together. The idea that you could go off in the woods and just take care of yourself, I just really think that that's not just stupid. I think it's disobedient. I think we're supposed to be working together. I'm all for, like I said, increasingly localized economy, network. I think that, a local food co-op and all those kinds of things, cool, great. And I love being more connected to food. It tastes better. It's more fun to cook yourself. All of that is great, but the idea that you're trying to become this individual that's self-sufficient, I think that's a myth and not healthy.
Do you think that we give the government more power by paying so much attention to them?
Yeah, I do think that there's we pay attention to them, but it's in such a highly curated media. Like the things that we're seeing are so.
We don't ever watch the full.
We're not seeing what's actually going on. I don't think that we're. I don't think we're paying attention to what's actually happening. I think what we're doing is we're being lulled into this sort of spectator sport of a highly curated thing that is not actually representing what's going on. That's why, again, I say, like, if you get engaged locally, then you actually can find out what's really going on. You can know the people, you can know the issues, and you can get engaged.
Yeah. Why do we seem to only elect people that, although they might have good policies, don't seem to be upright individuals in their personal lives?
Well, so first of all, I think we should be careful about being too perfectionistic or more. We shouldn't try to be more godly than God. Qualifications for elder or minister are qualifications for elder or minister. I see sometimes people try to take, the qualifications for elder from Titus 1, 1 Timothy 3, and apply them to, say, your senatorial candidate. I don't think those go there. I really don't. And so there's a certain amount of I'm willing to just work with the real world. That it's fine. Now that said. When we have wicked people ruling, we shouldn't be surprised when our nation is under God's judgment. I do think there's a baseline amount of morality that we should be able to expect of our politicians, and I think that we just have completely lost, our moral compass when it comes to that.
Have we kind of is that the kind of thing that we have to enforce? Like, in order to run for political office, you must, your family has to be in order, and you have to be a good member in upstanding with your community. Is that the kind of thing you make the have to?
Well, sure, but I think the enforcement mechanism is the election itself. I think your vote is your judgment on that. There's this. Everybody's pressing right now for Biden to take this mental competency test or whatever it is.
Or play golf with Trump.
Yeah, one of those. I actually agree with him that I don't think he ought to do that, just because I hate the idea of some unelected bureaucrat who now has the authority to step in and say who can and can't run because you passed my intellectual test or you didn't. The idea of putting that kind of power on somebody we should not want that. That would be an unelected person making the judgment call that actually the voter is supposed to make. And so, yeah, I think that their ethics should be considered, but it's considered when I listen to them talk and then I go and make my vote.
Yeah, we apparently voted for Biden, and so that was how we...
We've his intellectual competency test has been these various speeches and interviews that we've been listening to. There it is. Now make your decision. Is he ready for president? The idea, also the idea that we would set a maximum age, like you can't run after 72, whatever. Some guys are still going strong well into their 90s, and some of them, I think they petered out right about 62. The idea that we would set an age, I just think that that's a silly thing. I think the vote is the determination.
So what are the next steps as far as like bringing that back, taking that back?
Taking which back?
Taking back as far as these people should be more moral, these people should be...
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that one piece that we're really missing is a media that actually will that will give us what's actually going on rather than a highly curated peak. So I think getting a much more aggressive media that's actually holding people accountable. It's funny watching them all suddenly be shocked that, wait a minute, maybe Biden is...
We were lied to.
Yeah, you saw everything that we saw. I mean, they were lying to themselves. So I think we do need a recovery of the media. But I think that, again, I'd say start locally, get your town straight, get your city council straight, and then work your way up.
Do you think things, as far as like, if we're going to do that, then things might start getting better locally, but it will take a while before that trickles upward into the more national scale?
Mm-hmm.
You think things are going to get worse before they get better just by default of we're now suddenly waking up and it's a bit late?
Yeah, it could be. I am reluctant to attempt to prophesy on how that's going to go. And like any given moment, I'll say, oh, it looks like it's going to get a lot better. And then, oh, it looks like it's going to get a lot worse. I have no idea how it goes.
Yeah. Where does NSA come into all of this?
Yeah, I would say that's going back to that. Like, let's start with what's right in front of us. I'm working to build something here that would have a disproportionate cultural impact. I'm hoping to give a select few students a certain kind of education that equips them to lead in a particular way for life. I think that there should be another 20 to 30 NSAs across the U.S. I know of at least maybe 7 to 10 schools that are like NSA trying to start right now. I'm really excited to see that kind of movement across the U.S. to start. And I think that it's important because, I mentioned that we've retaken that K-12 classical movement, but all the work that we did there has been quickly undone by all those graduates going off to colleges that then undid everything that they learned,
or gave it their best shot at least.
Yeah. And I think we need colleges that are actually taking the work that was done at those schools and then taking it to the next level. I think when you have 20 to 30 schools like that and families all over committed to giving their kids that kind of education, we don't have to be at a place where we're educating 70% of America. If we're at a place where we're educating 3 to 5% of America, but we're doing the best, we're giving the best education that's out there, this country changes. It changes now. It changes generationally. It takes a little while for that to work out, but I think it's a significant impact.
Yeah, you're educating the people that are in those Washington, D.C. rooms.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that obviously there's been some market for this. Do you think that people are starting to realize that they need this as far as colleges? Or is it just that, because I know people are realizing, okay, I need to get my kids out of public school. Yeah. Do you think that idea has made it across to, and maybe out of the higher ed situation?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I was reading an article this morning about right now we're losing one small college per week that's closing down. Colleges are contracting all across the U.S. NSA, we've doubled our undergraduate enrollment in the last 4 years. We've had, I think, 4 or 5 years of each year consecutive record enrollment. We'll have another record enrollment this coming fall. We've seen all of these things contract and shrink everywhere, and we're exploding here. At the same time, I'm seeing other colleges wanting to start like us because of families all over the U.S. saying we want something like that where we live. I think people are seeing it, and I think a lot of things are changing right now.
Yeah, as far as colleges that are like that are becoming available, one of them is Jordan Peterson's college that he just started, which is all online.
Mm-hmm.
But NSA is not online.
Yeah.
What made you make that decision?
So because NSA is about, we're trying to do a certain kind of character formation, and I don't disbelieve in online communication. You can always get on a Zoom, you can get on a phone call. I believe you can do that, but you can't have the kind of impact on a person until you're actually in their life. This is the illustration that I always give to that question. So I'm a college president. Significant part of my job is fundraising. Now it's funny because I have meetings all the time, and frequently I'll push them to a Zoom or a phone call or something like that. But if I was going to talk to you about a large gift, let's say you were considering giving $100,000 to NSA. Which I do all the time. Yeah, right. It's funny that I even bring this up.
I know,
because,
right.
But if you were going to do that, I guarantee you I am on a plane. I am coming, and we're going to go out to dinner, and we're going to talk. And the reason why is because that kind of high-level investment always has to be in person. I've never had a large gift like that wasn't some sort of like close face-to-face interaction. And a 4-year degree is, I think, one of the highest level investments out there. I think that is profoundly important that you have a close connection on that. And so, yeah, I think that we have to be in person. As I said earlier, a lot of times the students will say it's not so much the NSA itself, it's the community. And that's purposeful. We want it like that. I can't have that impact on you in a weekly Zoom call. I can teach you how to use an Excel spreadsheet on a weekly Zoom call. I can teach you how the financial markets work. There's a whole bunch of things I can do, but I can't walk through what we're doing in that kind of environment. So I'm not a Luddite. I believe in technology, but I think once again we've lost what an education really is. It's this character formation, and because we've lost it, that's why our education. Our colleges. I think parents don't realize this now. How much what it takes to get a college education has diminished.
Yeah.
Used to be that was a 40-hour a week commitment to study for college.
Like a full-time job.
If you're doing an online degree, I bet you're probably working 5 to 6 hours a week to get that college degree. I mean, I've talked to so many students they're doing all their work online, and they can knock out their whole week of college, 5 to 6 hours. They can get it all done. You're not getting an education when you do that. You're getting a certificate. You're getting a piece of paper.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that if it's a large donation, if it's something that's extremely valuable, you're going to go look at it in person. And so that idea comes out here of this is a valuable thing that we're giving you, so we're not going to give it out online.
Right.
Because it's something that you need to be here for.
Yes.
Is NSA for Christians or non-Christians or both, and why?
NSA is for Christians. It is. I mean, we're clear. Our students are all sign a statement of faith. They're Protestant, evangelical Christians. Now, I don't believe that's the only way you have to do it. I totally understand a school that takes a different line. So when I say this is how we're doing it, I'm not saying it's the only way to do it. But for us, what we're trying to do is get together a bunch of people that are like-minded in a certain way and labor together for 4 years. And that initial like-mindedness gives us a foundation on which we can build and a head start. If we were having to argue about whether there is a God or not, we would be starting a lot further back, and I just don't think we would get as far. again, I know of schools that opt to take a different approach on that, and that's cool. It's just a different strategy. But for what we're doing, having that initial like-mindedness allows us to move in the same direction together.
Will NSA ever do like a kind of boot camp before freshman year where, you're running through for someone who is a new Christian or someone who is not yet a Christian, but you're trying to get them into that?
I think that would be a really interesting possibility, and we've thrown that around, and I'd say that idea is in the air. We'll see if it lands. There's some merit to that, but the idea of doing like a 1-year gap year that could be like, maybe this gets you ready for NSA, or maybe it just gets you ready to go out and take an apprenticeship somewhere else. I think that'd be a really interesting thing to try.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily the college's job to convert you. That's more of the job
Right.
of the church.
Yeah.
But having that nice starting block of we're all Christians here, we all understand that.
And part of it's also like because we're all living together in community, there are certain ethical standards. I think that if you're an 18-year-old single guy, you shouldn't be sleeping with one of the girls in your class, or even more with one of the guys in your class. And I think that it would be good if we were all on that same page before we all tried to live together.
It unmuddies the water, so you don't have to deal with that. You can deal with education.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, I always like to ask, what's your biggest regret?
Biggest regret? I think it's probably a small series of looking back and seeing opportunities in front of me that I did not give enough effort towards. I think that there's always this half-heartedness that like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And then I look back and say, gosh, there's so much more I could have gotten out of that time. I served, I was a reservist in the Marine Corps, and I look back at that time, and I was like as low a level and low a effort as you could possibly get. And I look back at that and I think, I wish that I had given more. I think when I was at U of I wish that I had given more. It's mostly a lot of like those little things like that, nothing big.
Yeah. What's your best piece of advice you would give to anyone watching?
To everyone watching? Well, I think, this is a larger piece of advice because it's to the older people and to the younger people. I think that older men tend to, when they give advice, they tend to look at what worked in their life, and then they sort of prescribe that to everybody else. And so it's a piece of advice with a sample size of one. And I think young men often will get guys in their life telling them, this is what you have to do. What you're going to do is you need to become an accountant, and then you need to, and they have this really specific, and what they basically do is they just described what happened in their own life as if this is what you.
Like this is the playbook for all success.
And I would say, first of all, the older guys, you need to like back off because there's God's, going back to the body image that Paul gives us. God gives us a body with all kinds of different body parts, and we need to be ready for people to go in different directions, particularly your own kids. Like that can be a hard thing because dads especially want to do that for their sons. You got to give them space to do their own thing, follow their own path. I'm starting to sound like a really bad like devotional poster of follow your heart.
We need some cute font.
Exactly. But I do think that there's a little bit of like trust God in this. And I think that is the real thing is like, look, trust God. And you ask my own regrets. I think that would probably be the second thing would be looking at how many times I was so frustrated because I didn't see what I was supposed to be doing. And then in retrospect, looking back and seeing how much that was the perfection of God's plan at that moment. That like, this was exactly what I needed to be doing. I think that's why I wish I didn't just invest more where I was, because I spent too much time fussing about or worrying about where I would go next or where I should be, and not realizing that like I'm here because God has a purpose for me here. Right. So I think trust God, pursue what's in front of you, and don't feel like everybody has to be in that same cookie cutter.
Yeah. Where can people find you and also NSA online?
NSA.edu. I think I tweet at president.nsa.edu or no, president, I don't know, NSA president.
I'll find it.
There's probably, yes, I'm really good at Twitter.
Yes.
what I would encourage you to do is go to the NSA blog. That's where a lot of our interesting media stuff is all coming out. When I do videos and whatnot, it'll all show up on the NSA blog.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on.
You betcha.
Appreciate it. See you guys.
Out a little,